And a good day. Welcome to another edition of Catchin KARP Outdoors, our podcast that honors Minnesota's great outdoors. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it here. Catchin KARP Outdoors, a production of KDUZ, KARP, KGLB Radio, and the Inkstead Minnesota Radio Network. And back on the program here on KDUZ, KARP, KGLB, and we're here to talk some ice fishing as, well, the temperature has dropped a little bit, and maybe you are out on the ice looking for a walleye or a northern or panfish or whatever, and here to help you catch those big ones, our resident fishing expert, Matt Larson, fishing guide. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning, Joel. How are you doing this morning?
Doing very well, and boy, it's been a little while, but it's good to be talking again. Good to be back on the ice, I guess, for a lot of fishermen.
Oh yeah, it's been an interesting year so far in the ice fishing realm. Lots of things going on, lots of different ice conditions around many of the area lakes, so that always puts an interesting crimp in what's going on out there.
Well, and we'll talk in more detail, but maybe just generalize. How has ice fishing been so far here this year?
It's been kind of a hit and miss, to be honest with you. I've had some really good days, and I've also had my fair share of poor days. And so it really kind of depends on the weather conditions, what the pressure is doing. And those are really a lot of the things that I'm going to be paying attention to as the season kind of keeps going here. But nevertheless, we're coming into a cold snap now, and that can pose some challenges for people. So some of the things that I like to do to combat that are rig my lines differently, maybe use smaller bait, things that as fishermen know, you kind of got to play with all of those things to make sure that you're staying successful and on top of that bite.
Now, does the weather conditions have any effect? Because if someone has a house, I mean, it's going to be you may have a heater on, and they're fancy enough houses now where you might be able to sit down and watch some TV. It's in some of these fish houses now. But for the fish now, can they tell if it's -10 or it's 30 or if it's windy or if it's snowy, or does that have any effect on fish bite?
Well, it's maybe not so much the weather per se, Joel, as it is the pressure around those weather systems. And these pressure systems that are, coming in high, or they're, when they're rising, or if they're falling off low, that has a lot more of the dictation, I think, in terms of how the bite and how the bite maintains itself. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that the weather does play, but it has more to do with the pressure, the barometric pressure. So I pay a lot of attention to that barometric pressure and how that's kind of revolving through the system.
I mentioned fish houses. Is there any difference between you sitting in a fish house or sitting in a shack or an open air hole, or is it just still fishing, and it depends on what you drop into that hole?
Hey, fishing is fishing, and if you have a good spot or you're able to move around, that kind of has a lot to do with it. Obviously putting down a wheelhouse, you're kind of stagnant and in your setup. But I fish out of portables, so I have a couple hubs that I set up, and what I'll do is I'll try to cover and canvas an area. If I'm fishing the basin for crappies, I'll try to set my 3 houses up so that I have kind of a area covered that's maybe 25 yards apart. I'll set each house up, and so then I'll keep jumping back and forth between houses to see if if that school is moving, or if that school is just sitting. Then I can usually get over top of them, and I can get my bite on, or try to figure out what's going to produce the bite. But if the fish are roaming, you're definitely susceptible to lulls in the fishing if you have a big heavy permanent and you're just sitting stagnant.
And that brings up a point as well. In the open water fishing, if I take my boat out to a spot and in 15, 20, 30 minutes I'm not getting anything at all, I'm moving. I'm going to a different spot, maybe across the lake. Maybe I'm gonna try this spot, that spot. I'm gonna zigzag all over till I find the fish. Is that kind of what you need to do for ice fishing too, even though it's not quite as easy as pulling the anchor and starting the motor?
I think if you're gonna set a big wheelhouse down, you're best served to take that extra 20 minutes before you start cranking the wheels down to drill around an area that you're thinking about fishing. Using your electronics, using these lake maps, a lot of this stuff has gotten so sophisticated in this industry, and more so for the ice fishermen. I think lake maps play a huge part in understanding fish movement and especially in the wintertime. And so I think taking that extra 20 minutes just to drill a few more holes, check some things out, and the other thing with the electronics is you have cameras. If you have a camera, utilize it. I mean, I think drilling just a couple extra holes to do the homework is going to make you that much more successful when you are out on the ice. And then that way, if you are sitting there stagnant, yeah, you can have the TV on and you can put a pizza in the oven, but you're also still catching fish while you're doing all that too, which is the number one thing that you're out there to do. So.
You mentioned in the electronics. So what types of things should folks be using, or what types of electronics do you like to use, whether it's to scout or to fish, or what are you bringing out on the ice with you?
Well, personally, I use a Humminbird Helix 7, and I set that up for ice fishing, and then I also have that set up for my Mega down imaging. So I go a little bit step further in that I've completely gone digital with all of my equipment. I used to use the old standby Vexilar FL8, but I've kind of graduated from that, and it has a lot more to do with the fact that I'm able to use this imaging that I have at my fingertips. So when I'm looking at a spot, let's say I'm fishing on the deeper side of a basin, and so the ledge is 25 feet. Well, what I can do is I can see kind of how that ledge is set up and how those fish could potentially move along that edge. That's going to make me more successful when I am out there, save me a bunch of time. So understanding your electronics and what they can do for you can save you drilling time in terms of, okay, I see what I want to see on the bottom. Now let's see if the fish are going to move through here. And then the other thing that I've been using with buddies that have it is LiveScope by Garmin. And I mean, that is a huge, huge game changer, even more so than my imaging. And the reason for that LiveScope is that you can see, hey, I can look and see how big that crappie is, or I can see how big that walleye is, or even more so in northern. You can say, oh, wow, that's a 34-inch northern, or roughly around there. I want to get that northern. So then that makes you more efficient in terms of, okay, I'm going to get this bait down there, try to get that fish. I see how big it is. I want it. So Garmin LiveScope has really changed things more so than my Humminbird Helix system. So the advancement of all these electronics and all these things, it's making the fishermen a lot more efficient, but it's also making them a lot more productive too, because you're seeing what you want to see versus a line on a Vexilar that, okay, it's really red, but how big is this fish? Is it 10-inch crappie, or am I dealing with 17-inch walleye? So that's where the electronics have really started to come in and take over.
Let's talk about dropping the line in the water. What kinds of presentations? What do you like for different species of fish here this winter?
Well, I've been having a lot of success with just a plain red hook and a minnow, but the presentation that I'm doing with that plain hook and a minnow is I'm tail hooking the minnow. I'm keeping it on a short line. And so what I mean by short line is I'll keep that on, if I'm putting a weight on there above that hook, I'm only putting it maybe 8 inches to 12 inches above that hook. And the reason for that is because I'm going to drop that down, I'm going to suspend that off the bottom, and I don't want that minnow swimming all over the place in the column. I want it in a specific spot, because then when you're drilling your holes, obviously you're drilling holes relatively close when you're fishing two set lines. So when I got one line down, the other line that I've been using I've been using a lot of rattle baits, and not rattle baits like your traditional rattle spoons. I'm using like the ultralight rip and wrap. I'm using the Acme rattling hyper rattle. So what I'm utilizing those baits for is I'm calling fish in. And this is working for both crappies and walleyes alike. That's what I've been predominantly fishing. And I've actually been catching a lot of fish doing this, because I'll call fish in using the rattle bait, and then they'll hit my scent line. So my set line is that plain hook, but I'm having a lot of success doing this, and it's because I'm getting those fish to come in. I've been fishing a lot of these area lakes that I'm not just around one or two or three houses. I'm in 20 houses at a time. So I figure there's 20 houses that have 20 different looking baits down there. I try to go with as subtle approach as I can, but then I'm also doing something different in that I'm trying to utilize those rattle baits to get fish into me versus everybody else that has lines down around me.
How about how about as far as species? What is biting? What should folks be targeting right now?
Well, right now, the walleye bite has still been pretty good, but the crappie bite has been the best. Crappies and sunfish has been the best bite that I've been on. The walleyes have been there, but it's not been as fast and furious of a winter on walleyes as I would have hoped. The northerns are also biting too. I mean, we go through lulls where if the panfish aren't running through our holes, all of a sudden we're catching pike, and that's because they're in their prey. They're in there feeding on the prey, which is all the sunfish and crappies that we're sitting on. So the fish right now to go target, I would say, would be crappies. This is early February, perfect time to go get on the crappies.
How about area lakes? What are some of the lakes that you've heard of in the area, or maybe even been on, that are producing right now?
Some of the lakes that have been pretty hot around have been Swan for crappies, Greenleaf for crappies and walleyes alike. Bell's been starting to pick up a little bit for crappies. I've been personally over towards the city lakes, so I've been fishing Waconia. I've been fishing Whaletail, Swede. I've been up by Winstead, and I've been on Ann. And then another lake that has been pretty good sleeper lake for walleyes, if somebody wants to go check it out, would be Silver Lake. I've seen plenty of houses. I live in Mare now, so I've seen plenty of houses start to congregate out there. I've not personally been out there, but I see what I see. So, and I think that's something to consider too. So,
now, as the month goes on, I believe it's later this month. The deadline for getting the fish houses off is later this month. Here, does tactics, does everything change as you get closer to springtime, or what? How do things change as you go on in the times?
Well, as the spring starts to come in, set in, and we get through the end of winter here, and the ice is going to start to honeycomb, sometime in March, I would assume. You're seeing these fish right now. They're staged in their midwinter spots. So you have crappies hanging over the basin of the lake. You have walleyes on the deeper edge of these breaks. So as things start to transition here, you're going to see those crappies start to migrate away from the basins. Those crappies are going to start coming, and they're going to be then on the deeper edges of the breaks. The walleyes will start to move up to the top side of the breaks, and they're going to get ready for their spawn. They're going to set up for their spawn. So as you start to see all these transitions, you got to think about what's coming, and what's coming is that these fish are going to start to stage and get ready for spring and spring spawn. So the walleyes will start to go towards wherever there's a creek or wherever there's running water feeding in. You'll start to see them congregate to those areas too as well. So they will move up to the top side of the break, but they're also going to move up to the top side of the break where there's current seams. And so a lot of these lakes will have current seams running through them. A lot of these lakes have creeks running into them. So that's a good place to start to try to look for those walleyes as the season gets later. And then, like I said, with the crappies, they're going to move from the basin to that deeper edge.
Well, I know I'm looking more forward to the spring and getting out there on the open water again, and should be and just getting outside. I mean, it's nice to we're Minnesota, we're hardy people. We like our ice fishing, our skiing, our stuff like that. But I also like my warm weather too, so I'm looking forward to that, I think.
Well, I've been looking forward to the spring pretty much since the ice came on, just because I'm more of a guy that likes to fish out of my boat. But the ice season has been good. It's going to continue to be good. I think the idea behind a lot of the stuff this year with a slow bite is just keep the presentation simple. And that's what I'll tell anybody that calls me for advice, even over listening to this radio. interview is that I just say keep it simple, because all of these new baits and everything that's getting introduced into the marketplace right now is all well and good, but you got to understand that that's for the consumer. And so while the fish do like it at times, keeping it simple is always going to catch you more fish 9 times out of 10.
Sounds good. And if folks would like some advice, or they have a question for you, or maybe they want you to guide them here in the spring and summer, how can folks get a hold of you?
Get a hold of me through my cell phone number. It's 320-583-9706, or they can find me on Facebook. I have connections to my website that way, and I'm free anytime. I'm available to go ice fishing as well. I don't guide as many ice trips as I do in the summertime, but if people want to look me up, it's the best way to get a hold of me is my phone number.
Sounds good, Matt. We'll chat again probably closer to opening fishing time, and I know both you and I are looking forward to that.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it already. You got my ears perked. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you. Matt Larson, resident fishing guide and expert here on our program on KDUZ, KARP, and KGLB. And thank you again to Matt for stepping in and being on the program here today. And it's winter fishing isn't always my cup of tea. I'm more of a open water fisherman myself, but there can be some big fish and some nice stuff caught around this time of year. So best of luck. Get on the ice and stay safe. Make sure you check that ice thickness. Stay safe. I don't want to read your name on the news that something bad happened to you. Tune in again next time here on Catchin KARP Outdoors. And don't forget, always keep that line in the water. I'm Joel Niemeyer. So long.
Catchin KARP Outdoors has been a presentation of KDUZ, KARP, KGLB Radio, and the Ingstad, Minnesota Radio Network. Check out all our past episodes on YouTube.